How's it going, everybody? Today's video is all about foot faults and stance violations. Hey guys, my name's Crunchy, as most of you know. The reason I'm making this video is because so many people don't know the difference between stance violations, foot faults, and even what foot faults are in disc golf. And this is sort of just more or less what I'm gonna refer my friends to. Because I've had, 5 discussions over the past week on what a foot fault is, what a stance violation is, and in just general, what the rules are. So do yourself a favor and just send this to any of your friends that end up breaking any of these rules and then they argue about it. So there is a little bit of a difference between what foot faulting and stance violations are. Stance violations get encompassed under that umbrella of foot faulting. So sometimes people will actually get a stance violation, but they'll just call them on a foot fault. It's more or less the same thing. I guess I should also mention that I am a TD and I'm rules certified. I help run leagues and I help run tournaments here in our local area. But yeah, let's get into it. So with this video, the point is that I've seen a lot recently where people are foot faulting or committing stance violations. And with stance violations specifically, it is more about throwing outside of the circle. Foot faults are can kind of be anywhere, but they're mostly called and egregious within the circle. And the circle is 10 meters, or 32 feet, 9 inches, something close to that. Within the circle, you obviously can't fall forward or that becomes a foot fault. Or you can't lean up against stuff, that becomes part of the stance violations, but people just say warning or whatever. The big thing that I have seen recently, and this becomes a topic of discussion across Instagram and Twitter, is that jump putts, which is most of the time it's you'll either be like this and putt and you'll jump that way, or the more common thing is when people are kind of straddled out. I'm gonna straddle kind of center so you guys can see me, where they're like this and then they jump. Or there's also the step putts, which becomes that. So we see pictures all the time of pros committing these violations, and it's because, one, people don't have slow motion in their eyes and people can't see exactly when you release. Legally, you must, for any throw, you have to release the disc with a legal lie. An illegal lie is more or less like a sheet of paper behind your disc or behind your mini. Oftentimes, people will, when they do those jump putts, the jump putts, or they do those step putts, and I step with the wrong foot, I know. They'll do the step putts. If you pause it, most of the time, I will say, if you're doing a 2-footed jump putt, you're probably foot faulting or committing a stance violation, because you're releasing the disc while you're in the air. Legally, you must release the disc with a point of contact on the ground behind your legal lie. In this example, I'm inside the circle, so I can't jump putt, I can't land past my disc until the disc comes to rest. So you can't lift your foot up or stand like this and lift this foot up. Your foot has to be in your legal lie and inside the circle, 10 meters. Both feet have to be behind the line of your lie. And for the sake of just pretending I'm outside the circle, like I mentioned, you have to have a foot on the ground in contact with your lie when you release the disc. So you'll see a lot of people, again, doing step putts. And if they release the disc while they're airborne, that is a stance violation. So like this, you're totally fine. If I'm outside the circle, I can putt and fall forward. Or, for example, my step putt is I load off my back leg and I push this way. So I just missed that putt. That's embarrassing. I wasn't paying attention. So you'll see me kind of line up this way and I'll push forward off my back leg just for the sake of making sure that my foot is always on the ground. I used to be the guy that did the 2-footed jump putt. The problem is when I would go back and slow-mo it, I was foot faulting probably, or stance violation, 50% of the time, because I was airborne. If your timing's not exactly right, you'll be airborne when you release. Since we are a sport governed by ourselves, more or less, and refereed by ourselves, more or less, nobody's gonna call that, and that's fine. But if you know you're foot faulting on your jump putts and your step putts, and you're only doing it because nobody calls you on it, that's pretty messed up and you're kind of a jerk, because you're playing a tournament in the PDGA, so you're agreeing to abide by the rules. So that's my dumb opinion on that. But I do believe that in the next, I don't know, probably soon, I'm shocked it hasn't happened. I would guess that in the next couple years that some rule will change so that like airborne putts are definitely illegal, and they'll like remove that margin for human error of like us not being able to see it. So if you're the type doing those like big step putts, you're probably foot faulting unless your feet are together. There are some people who do those like putt and then they fall forward. That's obviously legal. Their foot is on the ground still. But if you're doing the like stride and then putt, either your front foot's hitting the ground when you're releasing, which I see quite often, or you're airborne just a little bit, even if it doesn't feel like it much. You're like, our natural, like we feel like we're getting the most power is right after you're airborne. So here's kind of a side view, more or less, of what I'm talking about. If I'm putting directly that way, you can legally have your lie just like this, inside or outside of the circle. And even when you're outside of the circle, you can have a foot like closer, as long as you lift your foot up on release. So that is your legal lie. You can technically putt like this outside of the circle. It's kind of a common thing, especially if you're like backed up into the bushes. People will putt like that more for the sake of you can't get behind your disc or get to your legal lie near as easy. Again, you cannot do that within the circle because you can't land past your disc inside that 10-meter circle. Here are some examples of illegal putts, and you'll see people doing this all the time. I'm going to pretend like I'm putting this way. So here's an example, and you'll see me release the disc in air, and that's why it's illegal. I will say in our sport, again, since we're refereed by ourselves, most people don't call it, unless it's egregious that you're landing on that front foot and releasing the disc. That's when it's more obvious a foot fault. But technically, you must have that foot in your legal lie when you release the disc. Grab the disc so I can do two more. It's so much chasing.
Yes.
Especially, dude, disc reviews are the worst.
Yeah, I think I've seen a couple of yours.
All right, let me throw this, go get it, talk about it, throw it, go get it, talk about it. And then here's another instance of what a stance violation becomes. If I'm outside the circle and I'm putting this way, you'll see some people do this step putt. Now, I think I released the disc right before my front foot hit the ground, but I definitely released the disc in air. That is a foot fault, or stance violation, whatever you'd like to call it. Meanwhile, you'll see guys like, I think AB does it, Chandler Fry does it, where they do that step putt, and then they more or less putt as soon as their feet come together, and that back foot is typically still on the ground, which is a legal putt. A legal putt, not illegal, a legal. And that's gonna pretty much wrap this video up. Thanks for sitting and listening to me ramble that whole time. I will be sending this to people who I see on Twitter and Instagram who are breaking those rules and doing the stance violations. Obviously, in casual rounds, who cares? But again, I think we as players have some responsibility to make sure we're abiding by the rules as best as possible. As always, I'd like to thank my sponsors, Great Lakes Disc and Dark Ace Disc Golf. My links are in the bio if you want to support them. They support me, support this channel. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys. Take it easy.